Hello, friends and fellow lovers of all things beachy. Welcome to The Beach Speaks, the podcast that shares stories about the beach and our connection to it. I'm your host and beach lover, Paige Friend, helping you reconnect with the beach, return to your soul, and reimagine your life. So grab a cool drink, relax in your beach chair, stick your toes in the sand, and enjoy this episode of The Beach Speaks. Hey, beach lover. Before I dive into this episode, I want to know, what's for dinner? If you're like me and you have no idea, well, there's a podcast for that. It's called Three Kitchens. Here are the hosts, Aaron and Heather, to tell you all about it.
Are you tired of cooking the same old things? So are we. Come join us at Three Kitchens Podcast and get inspired to cook something new. We share our experiences cooking new recipes and have great conversations with amazing guests from the food community.
Whether you enjoy cooking or just like good food, join your favorite home cooks every Tuesday on Three Kitchens Podcast and get inspired to make great food.
I couldn't stop eating it.
So yummy. I ate like that whole bowl.
I just finished listening to their latest episode about making homemade limoncello and lemon tiramisu, and my mouth is watering. And speaking of limoncello, this might be a good time to grab your favorite summer drink and kick back, because today my guest Mary Carroll Moore and I are talking about her latest novel called Last Bets. It's set in the Caribbean island of Bonaire, and this is the perfect beach read because it has all the things: twists of fate, the paranormal, high-stakes gambling. Think Queen's Gambit meets White Lotus. Oh, and yeah, there's a hurricane, too. Well, hello, Mary. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Paige. I'm so happy to be here today.
I am really happy to have you. When your publicist reached out to me with your book, I was thinking, this is great for The Beach Speaks. And then you and I were talking and you said, well, I'm not really sure. It's not about the beach. And I said, but it has all the things. I just immediately fell into it. And I'm really glad that you came on to tell me about it. So before we dive in, I want to ask a question I ask all my guests. How is the beach speaking to you today?
Well, I remember in St. Augustine where we spend a little bit of our winter with the dogs. And I remember running on the beach with the dogs. I was barefoot and the sand was so packed right next to the water line. And they were trying to trip me. Of course, they love it. And they run over and into the water and then out of the water. And so I have this long-standing memory of that beach and how free I feel when I run on that beach with my dogs. And the pelicans fly over it, and it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous experience. So free. And the wind is, the sound of the ocean and the wind is constantly in all my cells when I'm running on the beach. So it's lovely.
Where at St. Augustine, I think you said before that you were camping there, or there was a campground there?
Yeah. We have a little camper van. It's an RV, but it's tiny, tiny home. And what I usually do is I look for sites that we can camp where we're really on the beach as close as you can get without destroying the dunes. So there's a place called Bryn Mawr RV Resort, which is nothing to write home about. It's packed with people and packed with RVs, but within a minute, you can walk across the bridge or the boardwalk and be right on the sand and feel completely isolated from the rest of the world, just you and the ocean. So we park so that the back of the camper is facing the dunes, and we can open them at night to sleep to the sound of the waves.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I love everything about that. And I'm going to have to look for that campground, Bryn Mawr. How often do you come to Florida?
Every winter. I live in New Hampshire, and about February 1st, I start to get very unhappy with the amount of snow and the ice. And here it's cold. It's a lovely place if you ski or you have a lot of winter sport interests. But for me, I just love to have a little bit of a break and get saturated with sunshine again, which is what the beach gives me. And my dogs also. They're short dogs. They're not good in deep snow. So when we get out of the snowy belt here and start heading south, they get happy, and I do too. So
yeah,
it's become a necessity in my life now. And because I'm a writer and I'm a painter, I can do my work from the road. It's not something where I have to be tied to a home studio or anything, and that makes it really easy. We live in the camper, and we spend probably about a month and a half to 2 months of every winter going south, gradually getting south and spending time in South Carolina or along the coast of North Carolina, and then heading Florida. So it's a fun trip.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that you do your writing on the road, and let's talk about this new book that you've come out with. Tell me all about it.
Well, I'm a scuba diver, and I was vacationing in the ABC Islands down near Venezuela, specifically Bonaire, which is known for its underwater marine park. It's just like heaven for scuba divers. It's the best diving I've ever done anywhere, including the Great Barrier Reef, which I was privileged to go to as well. But Bonaire is just a magical place. And so I signed up when I was in my 30s. I signed up for a week there with friends, and we stayed at a little resort. And I think we dived maybe once a day, maybe twice if we could. And then one day, I think it was towards the end of the trip, I was sitting in the afternoon at the tiki bar, and there was this fellow sitting next to me. I think he was a native of the island, and he said he had just lost his yacht. And I thought, well, maybe a shipwreck, or how do you lose a yacht? Did he misplace it? And he said no, he had actually lost it in a game of backgammon. And I was pretty speechless, because backgammon to me is something that you play with your family, when you're growing up. It's not a game that you bet anything on. But he told me that no, there's an underworld, a gambling underworld, at least there was at that time, in the Caribbean. And high stakes gamblers come and they play backgammon because it's one of the few games that is dependent on skill, not luck. So like poker players move to backgammon if they want to test their skill. So evidently there's this network of high stakes gambling games. And I thought, fascinating. So I went home with this seed idea for a book. And then I saw the Queen's Gambit, that whole idea of the woman who has the paranormal ability and can see the game. So I put the two together. I thought, what if we have this woman who's a portrait painter, and she goes to Bonaire to finish a commission, but she has this history of being able to see the future of the subjects she paints. And her father used her when she was a kid as let's see, how do you call it? A prop for his gambling. She would come to the games with him, and then she would be able to tell him what the moves were going to be down the line, so he would win. And she hates that ability in herself. So she comes to the island, and what if she had to use it? What if she was in desperate straits? She had to dive back into that gambling underworld. And the question would be, what would she do with that? Would she do it for selfish reasons? Would she do it for greater good? How would it affect her life? How would it affect the people around her? And I was just like enthralled with this idea, but it took me years to get enough of a skill, I think, as a writer to pull it off, because it's a very complex idea and plot. But that was the way the book came about. So Last Bets is the name of a move that her father taught her at the very end of a game, where you double the bets, and it's the last bet basically that you make, and it's the one that you win a lot of money. but it also is a metaphor for her life because this is her last chance to rescue herself. And so she gets the second chance of being on the island and seeing what would happen. I'm not going to spoil the ending because it's a surprise.
It's funny that you mentioned the Queen's Gambit, because what came to my mind was this was kind of like the Queen's Gambit meets Hawthorne's The Picture of Dorian Gray in that morphing portrait sort of thing of some man, with these interesting features. And then White Lotus.
White Lotus, yeah. That's the one I thought of too. People think islands are places that you can escape from your life. You can go to an island, it's going to be paradise. You don't have to carry all your baggage with you. You can be a different person, but, wherever you go, there you are. And that's what the characters have to find out, that they try to escape their past by going to this island, and it actually meets them. So the White Lotus is a lot about that, too.
Yeah. You have all those elements. And then I love how you wove scuba into all of that. And who knew that there's a underwater, I was going to say underwater.
Yeah, an underworld. Yeah, it's underwater too, but underworld gambling society that people come from all over to do this. And I thought that would be so cool to just create this cast of characters that gather at this really unknown island and win or lose their lives. And then what if I put this character, Ellie, the portrait artist there, and she has to win or lose her life too. And then I have a hurricane that's about to come.
Well, yeah, then there's that.
I know, I can't leave well enough alone.
To me, it lent some sense of immediacy. I mean, not only does Ellie need to, she has some financial needs of her own that are pending soon, but then everything that everybody is doing has to be done kind of before this storm happens, and it's kind of looming in the background.
Yeah, and I've never been in a hurricane like that. But I did a lot of research. I have a friend who is a fellow author, and she's a storm sailor. She's sailed around the world, and she's a solo sailor sometimes. And she is so knowledgeable about what to do in a situation like that. And I tapped her. She offered to help me because I was really not knowledgeable enough, because I have one scene towards the end that you'll get to eventually, Paige, but it's one of the characters takes a boat out right before the hurricane. And I wanted her to live, and the way I had written it, my friend said there's no way a person could live this kind of situation if they're on a small boat caught in a hurricane out on the ocean. But she figured it out, and she helped me work it so it was authentic, and thank God for help, because there's only so much that you've experienced in your life as the writer that you can put on the page. You have to draw from other sources. Like I'm not a gambler, so I had to learn a lot about backgammon and about the gambling world from research. That was fun.
Yeah, I bet you that was fun. Yeah, I was thinking about that adage, write what you know. And a lot of people say, no, don't do that. But I was thinking, write what you love.
That's it.
And about scuba. So let's talk about your love for diving and your experience there in Bonaire. And then I'd love to hear why it is so, in your opinion, better than the Great Barrier Reef.
Okay. Well, scuba started for me. I was married to a man in my 30s who was a really passionate scuba diver, and I'd never dove before. And I snorkeled, of course, but he took me through the lessons and I got my certification. And then our plan was to move to Hawaii and become dive masters and live on the beach. So I took all these certification classes. There's open water, there's night diving, compass diving, all that. And I got certified in everything. So I was really having a wonderful experience as a dive student and getting better and better. And we traveled a lot. We went to all kinds of dive sites to test them out. But I hadn't been to Bonaire. And the relationship, unfortunately, broke up. And so my trips after that were with other people that were divers. And one time around the Caribbean in a boat, we took a bear boating for 2 weeks where most of your listeners probably know what bear boating is, but basically you hire a boat that you can live on and you sometimes hire a captain and then you're the crew. So we did that, and we would just pull up to different islands in the Caribbean and dive off the back of the boat and, take the little dinghy in for a restaurant, like a meal at night. And it was just idyllic, So I got so hooked on diving. And then a friend said, the best place you got to dive is the Great Barrier Reef. And I had friends in Australia, so I managed to find a way to get there. And I went to a beautiful island off the coast of the Great Barrier Reef. And I was diving one day, and my eardrum, it didn't burst, but it was damaged. So I couldn't actually descend anymore. And that was the end of my diving. So at least I got to the Great Barrier Reef, and I had many, many years of good diving. But now I can't actually descend because you have to be able to clear your ears.
Equalize, yeah. Oh, I'm so sad.
I know. Well, life moves on, and you get something else you're interested in. But the thing about diving is that you're underwater, and it's like a dream experience almost. It's all you can hear is the sound of your breaths and the regulator breathing back and forth, and you're almost weightless because you've equalized your weight down at the bottom of the ocean. And it's just the most dreamlike, beautiful experience I'd ever had. It was like nothing I could describe. And so in the book, Last Bets, what I was trying to do is create two environments where the rules were different. On land, Ellie has a certain history. She's carrying all these burdens. She has a relationship with other people a certain way. But underwater, everything changes. And suddenly people that are her enemies may not be. New alignments or allegiances are created underwater. So the two environments, as I experienced them as a diver, were, on land, you're someone, and then underwater, you're someone else. So I was playing with that dichotomy as well. And that's part of what fascinated me as a diver, because, your body feels different underwater, and, not just swimming, but underwater, like diving deep down. It's a phenomenal thing.
Yeah, and most of us dive with a buddy.
Definitely.
So you are in partnership with somebody, and you both have to regulate your breathing and your air somewhat the same. Otherwise, someone's got to go up, and you got to go up with them.
Exactly.
That sort of thing. That's been my experience. And, is that why one of your characters are from Australia? Because you had that experience?
Yeah. And I love Oz and all the Aussies. Everyone I met there, I just adored. And I just love the accent. And I love everything about Australia. So I wanted to bring in Australia. I have lots of friends there. So I was able to, get good, authentic research. And I wanted to bring in an Australian girl who was really on the edge of her life. She's set fire to her boyfriend's van. She's almost been in juvie. Her father pulls her out and takes her away to this island for the dive month that he's part of. And she hates it. She's like trapped. She's left her home, all her friends, and she's trapped on this island in the middle of the Caribbean, way far away from Australia. And so she gets into tons of trouble, which I loved.
Yeah. Just kind of that rebellious teenager, want to be a grown up, but you won't let me, and you're making me do all these things.
I know. Her father, just like Ellie's father made her help him gamble, Rosie's father makes her pick the locks of the guest room bungalows and the doors and go in and try to scout how much money these people had and what they would afford to lose at the table so he can know how to place his bets. And it's like adults using people, using children in a certain way, and how the children end up finding their freedom, getting untrapped from that. I played with that too.
Yeah, I was thinking about the beach, and that we go to these places to, a lot of times, get away from our life and find a dream life, at least for like a little bit, or to find ourselves, or all the reasons that the beach kind of pulls us. And there's a fair amount of beach in the story. I was thinking about the characters, and what's your writing process, and how do you come up with these beautiful characters?
Well, I have a process I go through with character, because character is usually the way I enter my stories. I think of the characters first, and I do a kind of character sketch where I write down everything I can think about the character, what they own, what's under. I have these questions I ask. What's under the character's bed? What's in the refrigerator? What's their favorite pair of shoes? What music do they listen to? Who do they really hate and want to get back at? So I try to do an interview like if I was a reporter for a newspaper, and I try to interview the character, and my goal is to be surprised by the answers. And that's when I know I've really gotten into the character of something apart from my life, which is the goal, I think, in fiction, is that you don't duplicate your own life or your own limitations of knowledge of people. You actually explore into others. The other part that I used to go into restaurants, and actually airports are really good for this, or doctor's offices, and I take notes on dialogue. I sit there and basically I'm eavesdropping, and I write down lines that people say because they're so amazing and ridiculous. Some of the things that people say out of the blue. I remember being in a doctor's office, and it was somebody had cancer or something, and they were sitting behind me, and the person next to them started talking about a casserole made of turnips. And I thought, this is out of a dream. What is going on? But that's the kind of thing that I'm writing down options or dialogue ideas as I sit and listen to people. So I'll collect this character sketch from the questions, and I'll collect ideas for dialogue. And then I call it the negative space around the character, all the surrounding elements of a character's life. Like if you walked into somebody's room or bedroom or their kitchen and you wanted to know more about them, you might look at their refrigerator, see what they have on the fridge, or what books are on their shelves, and like, what is the surrounding a life of this character? Not just what they present, but what echoes in their environment. So that's another aspect of how I build my understanding of a character. But it takes a lot of time. I spend a lot of time writing really bad stuff, really bad scenes, and then slowly getting more and more refined into who this person is, and what would they walk like? What would they talk like? How do they use their hands when they talk, or they don't? Or, what do they look at on their phone, and things like this. So it's a process of getting to know this very alien person that is not you, and making them more and more surprising to yourself. I think that's the key.
Yeah. So I guess that's where the write what you know adage is, where people say, no, don't do that, because when you write what you know, you're missing out on all that richness of that person that you don't know.
Yeah. And I think I bring a lot of, I don't know, as I start to be more, as a human being, as I start to be more curious about other people in my life. I wasn't always this way when I was younger. I was more interested in art and books and kind of introversion things. But as I started to get to know friends and get to know family and kind of figure out what makes them tick, how do they present themselves to the world, and yet in the inside of them there's something else. Like what is the difference between what they show and what they hide, for instance? And that all interests me now. I'm much more fascinated with people now than I used to be, and I think that's why the characters are getting better on the page.
I can totally relate to that. I wanted to ask you about the artist part of you. Tell me about what you do in that realm.
Well, I toggle between writing and art. I find that the two art forms are really important to have both of. I could never decide, as an artist as a kid, and then I got into writing, and I couldn't really decide which one to study more. Writing is my profession, and art is not, but I've exhibited and I've sold paintings, and I think I've gotten to a skill level that I'm pretty pleased with. But the thing that I like to do best, I'm a plein-air painter, which means I paint outside. And the thing I like to do best is when we go on these winter trips, I load my travel easel and my canvases and everything into the back of the van, and we stop to paint. I stop to paint. So like I'll pull off the road for an hour and do a quick study of something. And one of the favorite places to paint is the beach. It's a little tricky because of the wind. So you have to be careful to be kind of sheltered, still have a view, but be sheltered. I was on Amelia Island painting once, and that was a really good place because it wasn't as windy. I was able to shelter myself in a it was like a little gazebo on the sand, and I could keep out of the wind, and my easel wouldn't blow over, and I could still see the shoreline and the water. because the contrast between how the water looks as it moves is really amazing to try to paint. It's very hard. And then the sand, how it reflects the light. So the beach is one of my favorite places to paint. I have tons of paintings of the beach, and so that's always been a fascinating thing for me to see how the light changes. The light at the beach is so intense and brilliant, and so it has a different atmosphere because of the water, the moisture from the water, and the way the wind changes things. So I paint a lot of impressionist style. So that light is really important to my paintings. And that's part of why I include artists in my books, because I'm so into it.
Yeah. I had just had a guest who's a plein-air artist here in town. She's only 19, just starting. And we had that conversation about how she lives here at the beach and sitting there. And she says, you have to paint really fast because things are moving very quickly, and impressionism lends to that because you're just using those quick brush strokes, and the energy of it is what you're capturing, as well as the light and all that. I admire anybody that can paint in general, but that I just notice when I'm on the beach in the mornings, I like to take pictures of the sunrise and trying to capture the light as the sun's coming up, and it's this sparkle trail is up to the shore, and how that's ever changing. It's a beautiful place to create art.
It's just wonderful. And I learned a lot about the way the water, like the person you're talking about, the 19-year-old, she's very correct when she says how it changes so fast, because if you're trying to paint the water as it comes up on the shore, how the waves have you'll get a series of waves, and then the curl of the water as it touches the shore, and right before it recedes, there's like a foam edge that's white, and that foam edge reflects the sky. So then you have to do all these color, analyzing the color to make sure you get the foam edge correct, and then the layers of the water going out back to the waves, and oh my God, it's hard. It's really hard.
Well, for me, when I'm stuck on something and I just can't get past whatever it is, if I go out and try to do something creative, anything that kind of gets that creative juice flowing. Does that help you do you ever have like writer's block and then think, oh, maybe let me just paint something and something will happen?
Definitely. And I found it, I even get painter's blocks. So my teacher said, well, have 2 easels going at once. So in my studio, I have 2 easels, and oftentimes when we travel, I'll stick one painting up like on a chair and then have the other painting on the easel and go back and forth, because I get to a place in a painting, also in a piece of writing, where I just don't know where to go next. And my clue is I'm starting to repeat stuff. If I start to repeat what I know, then I know I'm not being fresh and I'm not inspired. So I have to pause and go to the thing that will give me the refreshment. And sometimes it's just like walking outside, like you would walk on the beach to get refreshed. And then you can go back to the thing you're working on and you're completely different. But if I'm painting, for instance, on the beach, I have to stop that painting and maybe I'll turn around and do the other view the other way. And just for half an hour or 20 minutes, I'll do something else, and I'll come back and I'll look, oh my God, I see something I didn't see. And then I can move forward. And that's also true with the writing. I go back to the writing after painting or being outside, taking a walk, and I'm a completely different person. All these ideas have started to come in, like my brain has loosed its grip on whatever was stuck, and now I can blow back into the creativity. So it's a really, really good idea to be able to toggle back and forth. I don't know what I'd do without my different art forms and my ability to switch.
I know there is nothing better for me than a beach walk to get me out of my head. Sometimes I get overwhelmed with the things and I just don't know which direction I want to go in. I just have all kinds of ideas and things. And so if I go on a beach walk, that helps me gain some clarity or fresh ideas that I know this is where I want to go. It helped me when I almost stopped podcasting. I just thought, this is a lot of work is anybody out there listening? Do I even really have anything to say? I mean, all of those things that go in your mind. And I went for a beach walk listening to one of my favorite podcasters, and then it just came to me, no, you keep doing this. There's no reason to stop. You have something to say. I like to think that my voice is my art, or that the podcast is somewhat of my art.
I think it's wonderful. My son is 29 and he does nothing but listen to podcasts. So that whole generation is just so hooked on podcasts. And I think it's how they get their information and their community and their inspiration. So don't stop. This is a really good thing. I'm glad your beach walk talked you out of it.
That's how the beach speaks to me, for sure, for sure. You said that you'd never been in a hurricane or anything like that. Have you ever been in a situation diving, other than what happened to your ear, where you thought, this could be potentially not a good outcome?
Yeah, I think my husband, before we were married, I think he was diving and he had a cut, and there was a shark actually that was circling him and the boat. He got in the boat in time, but that was like so petrifying to me. The fact that, you have to be very careful about any bleeding, any wounds or anything like that underwater, because it attracts, the smell attracts the sharks. I've mostly dove in places that are shark infested. And so that would be the biggest fear that I've had. The other one was my oxygen, my tank was low, and I was having trouble with my regulator, the breathing apparatus, and I had to buddy breathe with someone. So sometimes, you know this, and I bet a lot of your listeners do too, but there's something called an octopus that you can attach to your tank, which allows another person to breathe off of the air that you're carrying if their regulator goes off. And so I've done that. That was kind of scary. Yeah. Diving is a very risky thing. It's actually like, why am I doing this? I'm 60 feet underwater and I'm breathing from this little tank, and I'm not an amphibian. I don't know how to live underwater, but here I am. So we do these risky things as humans, but it's it's wonderful. The water speaks to me. I mean, talk about the beach speaking. For me, the underwater landscape of an ocean is just magical. It's just incredible. So even with the sharks.
Yeah, even with the sharks. Have you heard of the concept of blue mind? There is a book called Blue Mind. It's by Wallace J. Nichols. And the tagline is a surprising science that shows how being near, in, on, or underwater can make you happier, healthier, more connected, and better at what you do.
I love that idea. That's great.
I highly recommend this book to anybody who loves the beach, loves the ocean, loves water, just being around water. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
It's very, very healing.
And scuba, I mean, it is a whole other world when you're under there. I remember taking scuba lessons in freshwater up at Crystal River area and in the springs. And that was a completely different experience, floating down the Rainbow River with these freshwater fish. And then we went and we swam a little with the manatees, and that was really special. Then, of course, as you know, you've taken a lot of dive training, you do practice the buddy breathing. And I think when we were practicing that was when it kind of dawned on me, you know what, this could get a little dangerous. You really do kind of have to pay attention to your breathing in and breathing out and just regulating that, not being too nervous, and because we tend to breathe fast when we're nervous. I am a swimmer by nature. I swam from 4th grade through college on a swim team, and being underwater and all that it didn't bother me at all. But then, when you get down to those depths and thinking, it's a long way up there if I run out of air. But yeah, it really is a truly magical world. I think this is probably a good place to kind of wrap things up, because I do think you've created this magical world combining all these wonderful elements of the gambling world and scuba and art and finding yourself and losing yourself and all of those things.
That's what I hoped. Thank you.
And it's a great book, I think, to read on the beach. Well, it's a great book to read anywhere, but I can see people putting this in their beach bag and sitting in their beach chair looking out and reading this and just being completely immersed in that world. Yeah. Any words of wisdom to our beach lovers out there who are aspiring to write or create art or just do something with their experience with the beach?
Well, I think what you said earlier, Paige, about beach walks, I was thinking about how I can still feel what the sand is like between my toes as I'm walking, especially right at the edge where the surface is hitting the sand, and that packed, wet feeling under my feet. And to even describe that small physical sensation is a really good way to enter a story. That's that one thing that touches you as you walk on the beach, you could bring into some words on paper. And so a lot of times when I start a story, I'll have the character that's my entry point, and then I'll immediately place the character in some setting like the beach and imagine what it would be like for her to be walking by the sand and what it feels like on her bare feet, the wind in her hair, all the things that we know so well, but we haven't actually created words for it yet. So that would be my parting little writing exercise if anybody wants to try it. I mean, enjoy the beach, of course, but if you want to bring home some they call them sensory details to put on paper, I think that would be a good start.
Good start. Yeah. There's one other question I'm dying to know, and what is in Ellie's refrigerator?
Well, back home in Georgetown, D.C., where she escapes from, she has pickles. She has like 4 kinds of really gourmet mustards. She has cat food for a cat that she had to actually put to sleep. So she's still keeping the cat food can. It is kind of a thing she can't let go of. She has the frozen birthday cake from her last birthday with her ex-husband. So there's a lot of sad memories in her refrigerator. But it tells me a lot about who she is, too, the things she's lost. Refrigerators are fascinating places to get to know someone.
Well, I will definitely have that in my mind now as I continue reading. And for those of you who are going to pick up this book, and I hope you do, you'll know at least what was in Ellie's refrigerator before she entered into this strange world of underground backgammon.
Yes, I know. The underworlds of refrigerators and backgammon and scuba diving.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and telling me about this wonderful book that you've written and how it came to be and your experience at the beach and all those wonderful things. I do want to share it with my listeners, so I will have links to how they can reach you and to purchase the book. Is there anything else you want us to know how to reach you? Are you selling any of your art?
Yeah, you can go on my website. It's marycarrollmoore.com. That's 2 R's, 2 L's, and 2 O's. So Mary Carroll Moore. And there's galleries there, so you can look at my art. And some of the one of the gallery links is for the waves and the water, and that would be the beach paintings. So you're welcome to check those out if you want. And you can also hear an excerpt from my book and watch a trailer and, find out all about my writing as well. So feel free to visit.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And thank you so much for having me on your show, Paige. It's been a fabulous time. Now I'm in New Hampshire and I'm like, when can I get to the beach? We have beaches too, but they're different. So
they are different. Yeah, they're beautiful in their own right, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you'll need to make a trip down here to St. Augustine soon.
Well, it sounds great.
And the beach is speaking. Are you listening? This was a terrific conversation. I was only halfway through the book when Mary and I met to talk about it, and I had no idea that she was such an accomplished scuba diver, and I loved hearing about her camping in St. Augustine. That's about 45 minutes away from where I live. Reading this book brought me back to the days I would play backgammon with my brother and how I always won. At least, that's how I remember it. I'm not much of a gambler, though, and while I like to think that I'm good at following my intuition, my ability to see the future needs a little practice. But I think I could handle the scuba diving part if I have plenty of air in my tank and a buddy to join me. And I love how Mary develops her characters, that she even thinks about what's in their fridge. I knew she was an artist, but I had no idea that she painted plein air, and it was fun to compare how she paints the beach with how my previous podcast guest, Annora, also a plein air painter, creates her art. The beach really does connect us. If you want to connect with me, sign up for my newsletter to learn more about how the beach is speaking to me, what I'm doing and not doing, some beach tips, all the stuff that doesn't make it on the podcast. Come join me on the beach and let's listen together. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Beach Speaks. If you enjoyed what you heard, please spread the beachy vibes and share it with a friend. Because, let's be honest, who doesn't want more beach in their lives? And if more beach is what you crave, go to thebeachspeaks.com and sign up for my newsletter. It's an easy way to stay in the know, collect some tips and travel hacks for your next beach adventure, and find out what I'm doing at the beach. And if you want to dive deeper into the ocean of support, consider becoming a Beach Speaks Patreon member. Your contribution helps keep the podcast afloat, and you'll enjoy some cool perks that only our Patreon family gets to enjoy. The beach is speaking. Are you listening?